This is the training for Bhutan 2016-2017 Census Enumerators on the functioning and disability questions. This half-hour video includes information on collecting data on functioning and disability using the Bhutan Census format. It includes the Washington Group short set, plus some additional questions included by the Bhutan National Statistics Bureau. The information on which this training is based is all available on the Washington Group on Disability Statistics website, which is www.washingtongroup-disability.com. The functioning and disability questions are in a supplement for the Bhutan Census, so workshop trainers and participants should take the opportunity now to maybe pause the video and check that all participants in the training have a copy of the supplement in front of them right now. The functioning questions go from DM 32 through to DM 41. The Washington Group short set of questions are those which are highlighted in yellow, and those are the ones which are used around the world in many countries. And then the Bhutan National Statistics Bureau has added on a few other questions for additional information. For the purpose of censuses and surveys, the most consistent and comparable way of measuring disability is based on a person's functioning. So the functioning questions in the census for Bhutan are those that are recommended by the United Nations Statistics Division for use in censuses, and these are called the Washington Group short set of questions. So they're used by countries all around the world, and they pick up people with a wide range of difficulties. The government of Bhutan is working on a national disability policy, and it's also considering ratifying the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So it's really important to have data on the circumstances of people with disability in the population so that appropriate services can be planned for. The census, the upcoming census in Bhutan, provides a critical opportunity to gather this data. And that relies on enumerators or data collectors who are committed and motivated to conduct the functioning questions really well. People who are clear communicators, and also enumerators or data collectors who are prepared to be objective, that is, not biased. So I mean, not giving your own opinion about someone's function, and don't make assumptions around what you think they can and can't do. You just really have to ask the questions in a consistent way and write down the answers that people provide about themselves. So there's a few pieces of information or principles or rules that we'll go through. Starting by when you're collecting information in a household, if you identify that you're talking to someone who may have difficulties with certain areas or may have disabilities, basically, it's ideal if you're interviewing the person directly and talking to them. However, in some circumstances, some people may not be capable of providing their own answers or responding themselves. So in these cases, it is okay to have a proxy respondent. So that would usually be the head of the household or the person who's the primary caregiver for that person with disability. But the main point is no one should be excluded from the data collection just because of their own difficulties functioning. So if you think someone can't respond, you really need to find a proxy respondent for that person. So another member of the family or the household who can answer the questions in relation to that person's level of functioning. So another important one for you to know is that these Washington Group short set of questions, which in the Bhutan Census they're called the functioning questions, they are for people 5 years of age and older. So don't bother asking these questions either to or even about children under the age of 5, because they're not valid for very young children. So as I said before, it's important to directly talk to the person with disability or difficulties, rather than talking to the caregiver or the mother or the head of the household about them. Because when you talk and ask the questions directly to the person with disability, it shows respect and it allows them to speak for themselves. And sometimes that person may never have had that chance before, and there's no reason for that. So this is an opportunity for you to be respecting that person and asking the census questions directly. In some cases, a person may not be able to communicate with you directly like this, verbally, and they may use sign language. So if they use sign language, you will need to have an interpreter, a sign language interpreter, to help with that interview. So this can often be a member of the family, or sometimes you may need to return to that household with a sign language interpreter who can help you with that interview. In other cases, some people with intellectual disability, so that's about their cognition, their brain's ability to function, they may also need someone to assist with the questions as well. Not only the functioning questions, but all of the questions in the census. So if someone is, in that case, someone with severe intellectual disability or dementia, or sometimes people are very heavily medicated, and so they're also not able to answer the questions themselves. And also the last group would be children who are very young, say from the age of 5 right through to about 7 or 8. They may not be able to answer themselves. It depends. Children really vary. But you might want to do the questions with people in those categories. Do it with someone else in the family as well, or from the household, or a guardian. In some cases, the person with disability or dementia, etc., may not be able to be interviewed directly. And if that's the case, then it is okay to interview a proxy person entirely about the function of that other person. Okay, so we're up to the functioning questions. So these next questions ask about difficulties you may have doing certain activities because of a health problem. So do you wear glasses or contact lenses every day?
No.
No. Okay. And do you have difficulty seeing? So these questions have 4 options. You can say no difficulty seeing, yes, some difficulty seeing, yes, a lot of difficulty seeing, or I can't see at all.
No difficulty.
Do you have difficulty hearing, even if wearing a hearing aid? No difficulty, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot hear at all?
No difficulty.
Do you have difficulty walking or climbing steps? No difficulty, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, cannot walk or climb steps?
Yes, a lot of difficulty.
Do you have difficulty remembering or concentrating?
No difficulty.
Do you have difficulty with self-care, such as washing all over or getting dressed?
A little bit of difficulty getting dressed.
Okay, a little difficulty. So we have to choose from these options. So would you say some difficulty or a lot of difficulty?
Yes, some difficulty.
Okay, great. So using your usual or customary language, do you have difficulty communicating, for example, understanding or being understood?
No, no difficulty.
Okay, so regarding the difficulties that you have mentioned, which one causes you the most concern?
Walking and going up steps.
Okay. Great. And at what point in time did you start experiencing this difficulty? So birth or childhood or as a working age adult or...
In childhood.
Okay. And what was the cause of the difficulty?
I had an accident.
Okay. Excellent. Great, well we're done with the functioning questions, thank you. Okay, so we're up to the functioning questions. So these next questions ask about difficulties you may have doing certain activities because of a health problem. So do you wear glasses or contact lenses every day?
Yes.
And do you have difficulty seeing even if wearing your glasses? So the answers for these questions can be no, no difficulty, or yes, some difficulty, or yes, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot do it at all, like you can't see. So do you have difficulty seeing even when wearing your glasses?
Yes, some difficulty.
Great. Okay. Do you have difficulty hearing even if you use a hearing aid? So you can say no, no difficulty, yes, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot hear at all.
No difficulty.
Great. Do you have difficulty walking or climbing steps?
Yes,
Would you say some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or you can't do it at all?
a lot of difficulty.
Okay. Do you have difficulty remembering or concentrating?
Yes,
Would you say some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot do it at all?
some.
So do you have difficulty with self-care, such as washing all over or dressing?
No,
Now, using your usual or customary language, do you have difficulty communicating? For example, understanding or being understood?
being understood.
Okay. So would you say some difficulty or a lot of difficulty, or people can't understand you at all?
A lot of difficulty.
Alright, so of the difficulties that you've mentioned, which one would you say causes you the main concern?
Communication.
Communicating, okay. And any others, or is that the main one?
Walking and stairs.
Walking and stairs, okay. Number 3. Okay, so thinking about the communicating, at what point in time did you start experiencing this difficulty? So these options are from birth, or sometime in childhood, or when you're of a working age adult, or even older.
Working age adult.
Okay, so communicating the problem started working age adult. And the walking and climbing steps, when did that start as a problem?
At the same time.
So what was the cause of these difficulties?
An accident.
Okay, for both the communicating and the walking. Great, all right, we're done. Thank you. Let's move on to the next section of the census. Okay, so we're up to the functioning questions. So these next questions ask you about difficulties that you may have doing certain activities because of a health problem. Okay, so do you wear glasses or contact lenses every day?
Yes, I do.
Yes, okay. And do you have difficulty seeing even if wearing your glasses? Now these questions have 4 response categories. So you could say no, no difficulty seeing, or yes, some difficulty, or yes, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot do that at all. So in relation to the question which is seeing.
I would say a lot of difficulty.
A lot of difficulty, okay. And do you have difficulty hearing, even if you use a hearing aid? So you could say no, no difficulty, yes,
No.
some difficulty,
No, no difficulty.
no difficulty, great. Okay, do you have difficulty walking or climbing steps? So no difficulty, or yes, some difficulty, or a lot of difficulty, or you cannot walk or climb steps at all?
I would say a lot of difficulty because due to my eyes, yeah, my saying, yeah.
Right, okay. So it's a lot of difficulty for that one. Good, thank you. And do you have difficulty remembering or concentrating?
No, I don't.
No, okay. All right. Do you have difficulty with self-care, such as washing all over or dressing?
Some?
Some difficulty,
Yeah.
okay. Now, using your usual or customary language, do you have difficulty communicating? For example, understanding or being understood?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, so of the difficulties that you mentioned, which difficulties cause you the most concern, or just difficulty if you want to just choose one?
Will be the saying
Yeah, sure.
and a little bit of getting around.
Getting around,
Yeah.
so the walking and
Walking
climbing
and
steps.
climbing,
Okay,
that sort of stuff.
great. And thinking about that first one, which is seeing, at what point in time did you start experiencing this difficulty? So the options for that question are from birth, in childhood, or since you were a working age adult. And you're not old, but the last option is if you were old from then.
I've got it when I was from birth.
From birth,
Yeah.
okay. All right, and what about the difficulty walking or climbing steps? When did that start?
Childhood.
Childhood, yeah, that makes sense. All right, lastly, what was the cause of the difficulty? So regarding seeing, the options are it was an accident, or from a disease or illness, or something else, or you don't know.
To be honest, I don't know.
Sure,
It's,
that's fair enough.
got it when I was born, so
Yep.
not sure.
Okay. And regarding the walking, do you know what causes that difficulty?
Well, I guess because I don't see
Yeah.
stuff, so it's a bit harder to get around. That's
Yeah,
all,
okay.
basically. I mean, I'm walking fine, but it's just getting a little bit difficult.
Great. All right.
Get
So you
around.
walk fine, but it's getting around.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm going to put down other
Yep.
for that category. All right. Thank you. So we're done with those questions. Now we'll move back into the main part of the census. Great. So these next questions ask about difficulties that you may have doing certain activities because of a health problem. Yeah, is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you wear glasses or contact lenses every day?
No.
No. Okay. Do you have difficulties seeing?
No.
No? Okay. So the options for these questions, there are 4 answers that you could choose from for all of them. So they are no, no difficulty, yes, some difficulty, yes, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot do it at all. Okay, so for that one, obviously you have no difficulty seeing. All right, do you have difficulty hearing, even if you're wearing a hearing aid? So you could say no, no difficulty, yes, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot hear at all.
No difficulty.
Okay. Do you have difficulty walking or climbing steps?
No.
Okay. Do you have difficulty remembering or concentrating?
So can I split these into 2 different parts?
Okay, what
So-
do you mean?
For the remembering, I have no difficulty.
Okay.
For the concentrating, I have, yes, some difficulty. Some.
Right, okay. So we can't split them, actually, we have to keep them together. Now, if we think about it with other kids who are the same age as you, but in your classroom at school, if you think about that concentrating, that difficulty concentrating that you have, would you say that's about the same as the other kids, or is it you have more difficulty than the other kids?
The same.
It's the same. All right, so you're sort of average.
Yeah.
Okay. So then let's bring it back together, and you have to choose one of these answers. If you think about generally you're remembering and you're concentrating, do you have difficulty? Would you say no?
No difficulty.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Karima. Next one. Do you have difficulty with self-care, such as washing all over or getting dressed?
No difficulty.
So using your usual or your customary language, do you have difficulty communicating, for example, understanding or being understood?
No difficulty.
Okay. All right, well, so we're done with those functioning questions. Okay, so do you wear glasses or contact lenses every day?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have difficulty seeing even when wearing your glasses? No difficulty. Some people who wear glasses have difficulty seeing, and some have no difficulty. Okay, do you have difficulty hearing, even if using a hearing aid? No. Okay. So these answers, you can say all of them have 4 options. No difficulty, yes, some difficulty, yes, a lot of difficulty, or no, you can't do it at all. So I think you've got no difficulty with seeing or hearing. What about, do you have difficulty walking or climbing steps? Would you say no difficulty, some, a lot?
No difficulty.
No difficulty. Children should be 5 or over and can answer for themselves unless they need help. So Noah, do you wear glasses or contact lenses every day?
No.
Okay. And do you have difficulty seeing? So you can say no difficulty, yes, some difficulty, yes, a lot of difficulty, or you cannot see at all.
No difficulty.
Okay, that's enough example interviews. We'll just finish up with some written points here which are on the screen. So a few points to remember. The first one, meeting people with disabilities is no different from meeting anyone else. You just need to relate to the person with respect and dignity, empathy and equality. If there's a personal assistant helping that person with disability, then address your questions to the person with disability directly, not to their assistant. Secondly, if you're interviewing people who are deaf or hard of hearing, if the person uses sign language, it may be necessary to provide an interpreter for the interview. This could be a family member or a friend or a colleague of theirs or a trained interpreter. You should face the person who is deaf or hard of hearing and direct the questions to him or her, not to the interpreter. If possible, try to undertake the census in a quiet place with the person to minimise background noise. And it may also be useful to offer to show the written questions of the census to the respondent so that they can read the text. So turn your supplement form around or the census form around and actually show them the questions. That's if they can read. Some people haven't had the chance to go to school and will find that, that's not useful to show them the written text. You'll need to use your judgment in that situation. Thirdly, interviewing people with physical disabilities. So if you're talking to someone in a wheelchair or who's seated in a low position, try to sit yourself so that your head is at about the same level as them to avoid that person getting a stiff neck. So certainly don't be standing next to the wheelchair, because then they'll have to look up at you for the whole census, which is too long. Okay, the last page of points relates to interviewing people who are blind or partially sighted. When you approach a blind person, remember to identify yourself clearly and indicate anyone else who is present with you. Also at the end, you should indicate clearly when the interview is finished and when you're leaving, so that they're not left there by themselves wondering whether they should still be talking to you. If you're interviewing people with speech and language disabilities, be encouraging and patient. Don't correct or speak for the person. Wait until the person finishes and resist the temptation to finish their sentences. If you don't understand what they have said, don't pretend that you have. You just repeat as much as you do understand and use the person's reactions to guide you. Ask them to tell you again if necessary. Do not assume that difficulties communicating also mean the person has cognitive or intellectual difficulties. Thirdly, interviewing people with an intellectual disability, be prepared to explain some things more than once. If the person doesn't understand the first time, that's fine, you're allowed to do that. Also, you can offer to explain terms if that's needed. And listen carefully to what the person is saying, not how it is said. So in summary, every person in the household gets the functioning questions, except for children who are under the age of 5. So every person in the population of Bhutan will have the functioning questions, which is a big deal, and it's quite an exciting venture really to do such a lot of data collection. I wish you all the very best.